Everyone told him this advice was safe. It wasn't. Ethan was 22 when the advice first settled into his life like a rule he never questioned. His parents, teachers, and relatives all repeated it with confidence and calm certainty. They told him to choose safety over risk and stability over curiosity. According to them, a steady job was the smartest decision any young adult could make. They warned him that passion fades with time, but bills never stop coming. Ethan listened because these people cared about him and sounded experienced. He believed their guidance would protect him from mistakes. After graduating, Ethan accepted a corporate office job without much hesitation. The salary was average, but the benefits and predictable hours felt reassuring. People congratulated him and called him responsible for choosing the safe path. They told him excitement was unreliable and that security mattered more in the long run. Ethan felt a small doubt inside, but he ignored it. He convinced himself that comfort was smarter than curiosity. That belief quietly became the foundation of his adult life. At first, everything felt organized and under control, which brought Ethan a sense of relief. His family felt proud knowing he was settled and financially secure. His friends saw him as someone who had life figured out early. He followed a routine that made him feel accepted and mature. Each day looked similar, but he believed repetition was simply the price of adulthood. No one talked about the long-term cost of ignoring inner instincts. No one warned him that advice meant to protect him could slowly become a trap. Ethan's life quickly settled into a routine that felt ordinary and expected. He woke up early, commuted to work, and spent long hours at a desk completing tasks that rarely changed. At first, the predictability felt comforting and adult. He told himself that consistency meant progress, even when days blended together. Whenever boredom appeared, he pushed it aside and reminded himself that stability was the goal. He believed this was what responsible living looked like. Questioning it felt unnecessary and even ungrateful. As the months turned into years, Ethan noticed that effort did not equal improvement. He worked harder, stayed later, and took on more responsibility, yet his life remained the same. His income grew slowly, but his expenses grew faster. He postponed dreams and personal goals, telling himself he would return to them later. Later always felt distant and unclear. The routine gave him just enough comfort to stay and just enough fear to avoid change. Without realizing it, he stopped expecting more from life. Ethan began comparing his life to the version he once imagined. He had believed that safety would eventually create freedom, but that freedom never arrived. Instead, he felt tired in a way rest could not fix. His job paid the bills, but it did not build confidence or direction. Still, he stayed quiet and followed the plan he had been given. The advice continued guiding him, even as doubts grew stronger. What felt normal on the surface was slowly draining him underneath. Over time, Ethan began to feel exhausted in ways that sleep could not solve. He woke up tired even after full nights of rest. His motivation faded, and small tasks started feeling heavy. Instead of questioning his situation, he blamed himself. He thought maybe he was weak or ungrateful. Everyone around him said this was just how adult life worked. Believing that made it easier to stay silent. At work, Ethan started paying closer attention to his older coworkers. Many of them had followed the same advice decades earlier without hesitation. They were still stressed about money despite years of experience. Conversations often revolved around bills, deadlines, and complaints. Their faces showed long-term fatigue rather than pride or fulfillment. Ethan noticed how afraid they were of change, even when unhappy. Slowly, he realized they were living proof of where his path could lead. That realization unsettled Ethan deeply, but he didn't act on it. The advice echoed in his mind whenever he thought about change. He reminded himself that risk was dangerous and comfort was smart. Fear disguised itself as responsibility and kept him in place. He ignored the warning signs because facing them felt overwhelming. Staying felt easier than starting over. Without knowing it, he was trading years of his life for familiarity. The breaking point did not arrive in a dramatic way. It came quietly, through a series of small moments that Ethan could no longer ignore. One afternoon, his manager announced changes that would increase workloads without increasing pay. Ethan felt something shift inside him as he listened. He realized how little control he had over decisions that affected his entire life. Years of loyalty had not given him a voice. For the first time, the advice he trusted began to feel fragile. Soon after, the company announced a restructuring plan that created uncertainty across departments. Rumors spread, stress increased, and fear became visible in the office. Ethan watched coworkers panic about losing jobs they had depended on for years. He saw how quickly stable could turn into uncertain. The advice that promised safety offered no protection in that moment. It had prepared him to obey, not to adapt. That was when Ethan finally questioned everything he had accepted as truth. He realized the advice was never about his long-term well-being. It was about choosing the easiest, least disruptive path. Playing it safe had not made him strong. It had made him dependent on systems he could not control. The realization didn't free him instantly, but it changed how he saw his life. For the first time, he understood that safety without options is not safety at all. Ethan did not quit his job immediately after that realization. Fear still held him back, and responsibilities did not disappear overnight. Instead, he began changing quietly, starting with how he thought. He questioned every belief he had accepted without proof. He noticed how often fear disguised itself as logic. Slowly, he allowed himself to imagine a different future. That alone felt risky and unfamiliar. After work, Ethan started learning skills that could exist outside one company. He read, listened, and studied in small pockets of time. Progress was slow and often frustrating. Some days, he wondered if the effort was worth it. Still, learning gave him something his job never had. It gave him a sense of movement and possibility. For the first time in years, his effort felt meaningful. The more he learned, the clearer the truth became. The advice he followed had not failed once. It failed consistently over time. It taught him how to survive, not how to grow. Ethan realized that growth always feels uncomfortable at first. Comfort, on the other hand, can quietly steal years of life. That understanding prepared him for the final lesson he still had to face. Years later, Ethan finally understood the true cost of the advice he had followed without question. It wasn't only the job he nearly lost or the time that quietly slipped away. It was the confidence he had surrendered by trusting one narrow path. Playing it safe had taught him obedience instead of resilience. It trained him to wait for permission rather than build options. Looking back, he saw how his choices had slowly shrunk. That realization reshaped how he defined success. Ethan began rebuilding with intention instead of fear. He focused on skills that could move with him rather than tie him to one employer. He learned how to plan for uncertainty and reduce dependence on a single income. Progress was steady, not dramatic, but it was real. Each small win replaced doubt with clarity. He stopped chasing approval and labels of stability. Control and adaptability became his priorities. Today, Ethan still works hard, but his effort builds leverage instead of cages. He understands that advice should be tested, not worshipped. Safety without flexibility is fragile, and comfort without growth is dangerous. The lesson stayed with him because it was earned the hard way. He now prepares for change instead of avoiding it. If this story felt real to you, subscribe so you don't repeat this mistake.